I I wish Richard Harrison the best, but I think I have a great show for you this morning. As many of you know, yesterday was the 50th anniversary of the riot. For some reason, it seems like it was only yesterday. Well, I have a very special guest with me this morning. I have Reverend Dan Aldrich, who was right there in the thick of things during that time. And he's an activist, all of this. He brought a wonderful archival picture, photo that only he has. And so much is going on. I have seen the Detroit movie. I've seen the movie Detroit. Now, we're going to talk about it a little more at length this coming Friday at 10 o'clock on Table Talk. But it was interesting, and I got a chance to talk to some of the actors yesterday. And right after this show, I'm going to talk to some more actors who are in the show. But welcome, Dan Aldrich.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you very much.
Oh, it was just my privilege to get you because I know that you were in the thick of things. But let's give the audience a little bit of your background. Um, you're a native Detroiter.
No, I was born and raised in Harlem, New York.
Oh my
I'm a
goodness.
Harlemite. I was raised in Harlem and in two small Queens towns called Corona and East Elmhurst, New York. Um,
My brother was born in Harlem Hospital.
so was I.
Oh, wow.
Born in Harlem Hospital. Uh, I'm the nephew of Dorothy Height,
Yes,
and,
The great Dorothy Height.
she and my mother were the last two children of my grandparents. Um, And so I went to Tennessee State University, Tennessee A&I. I'm a definite Tennessee Tiger. Uh, I came to Detroit,
What
and
was your major?
my major was business administration.
Uh-huh.
That's what I finished in.
Speak
Uh,
louder.
I knew very little about college at the time I was there, so I would have majored in something else had I known. I fell in love with anthropology, but when I went to school, I didn't know it existed. Then I came to Detroit in 1965. I'd been put out of school for participating in civil rights activities, and so I came here and worked for 7 months in the factory. Then I went back to Tennessee State after 7 months, graduated, and came here in '66, working for Chrysler Corporation as one of the early personnel management trainees. Worked at Chrysler for about a year. I resigned from Chrysler because Chrysler used to advertise a station wagon they produced in South Africa, and I worked at the Mack Avenue stamping plant, and I went and took on all their signs, so I couldn't work at a place that supported apartheid. So I left there and taught at Wayne State University. I taught at the University of Detroit. I taught at Wayne County Community College. I worked for Chrysler, assistant to Coleman Young for 13 years.
Oh, as an assistant, what was your main job?
I was in charge of essentially all of the neighborhood city halls on the east side of Detroit. So
Uh-huh.
everything primarily from Woodward to Grosse Pointe and from the river to 8 Mile Road. All the mayor's neighborhood city halls and activities on the east side of the city.
Oh, okay. How was that working for Mayor Young?
I enjoy working for Mayor Young. Mayor Young was
He
was
was funny.
he was funny. He was very funny. And sometimes he would come up with stuff and do stuff and say things, um, and not profane things, but sometimes profound things. Um, he was a person who had lots of personal experience, and so much of his experience he would share with you from time to time. He had strong position, strong integrity. For example, he used to tell us always, he told me repeatedly, don't ever say anything that you would not like to see on the front page of the Free Press. so,
Right, right.
and
That proved to be true, right?
proved to be true. And he said also, if you get in trouble, don't blame me. I'm not involved with it. You carry your own weight. Uh, he made
Oh,
sure you carried your own weight, um, and he always cautioned. That's why I hear people talk about some certain other mayors were like Coleman Young. No, first Coleman Young didn't take any money. Coleman Young was not interested in personal aggrandizement. you know, and so he had tons of integrity. He demanded the truth of his employees. He also demanded that you work for the people.
Right, 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 right. Just a great man. I never got a chance. I was at that first, when he won that night.
In '73.
Yes. In fact, my daughter was like 2 months old, not even 2 months old.
Hmm.
I brought her down there just to say, this is history. This is history. So it's so special.
Yes, I enjoy working for Coleman Young. He reminded me, he and my father looked amazingly alike, and in some ways had the same kind of temperament. You know,
Where's your father from
my
originally?
father originally from Goldsboro, North Carolina. He was born in Brogden Township, Wayne County, North Carolina, but he was raised in Goldsboro, North Carolina. But he came to Harlem when he was a very young man. Came to Harlem when he was about 12 years old, and made his living. Became a major player in the Transport Workers Union as a union organizer. And my
I,
mother too, by the way,
activism just runs in your family.
all the way back to my grandmother. My grandmother, Dorothy Height's mother, my grandmother was active in the Negro Colored Women's Movement way back in 19. It had to be around 1910, 1911, and up to 1916. She was in the Colored Women's Movement in Pennsylvania.
Wow. So how did you all get to Harlem?
Um, Harlem is an interesting story. My Aunt Dorothy in 1929 won a contest um, and a scholarship to Columbia University, well, within Barnard College. With my Aunt Dorothy, so they didn't expect, she won the Pennsylvania State contest. So if you when you won that contest, you then got scholarships. You had scholarship to Columbia or Barnard College,
Barnard.
and when she
Hmm.
went there to receive her scholarship and to go to school, they had a custom that only two black women could be in any one class at any one time.
You're kidding.
Right, and she was the third one. So they told her that she couldn't have the scholarship because she was the third black woman in that class, that freshman class. My uncle Benjamin, her brother, was so upset about it that he took her transcript and took it, walked it down to NYU, put it on the table, and said, "This is my sister, and she just been denied access to uh, Barnard College." They looked at her record and gave my aunt a full scholarship to NYU, from which she also got her master's degree. Aunt Dorothy never made anything less than a B from kindergarten through her master's degree. And when they saw her record, um, when they saw her record, they immediately admitted her to college. My grandfather then moved to New York, and the reason the family moved to New York is because my grandfather was a Republican, and when Roosevelt got elected in 1933, if you were a Republican, you had to lose your job. You either had to be a Democrat or nothing. If the Democrats were in, they fired all Republicans, and they fired all the Democrats. So
Really?
then, right, that's the way it went. So he had to leave Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh, or Rankin, Pennsylvania, because he couldn't find any employment. So he came to New York to work, and the reason he came is because his daughter Dorothy was in college, um, had just finished college actually, and so my mother was the youngest sister, and
Oh,
that's how we made our way to Harlem.
okay. So activism has been in your blood. It seems to me that there was no fear in talking to the man.
Oh no, I never had any fear in that regard. My mother, on the other side of my family, my aunt Evelyn was married to Floyd McKissick. So at one point,
Really?
the head of the National Council of Negro Women was my aunt, and the head of CORE was my relative through marriage, and all his children were my cousins. Uh, so my family has been involved in activism in some regard in the family since the early 20th century.
Everyone, I have Dan Aldridge here, an activist from the core. From now, you got here in '66,
Yes.
and then you told me that when the riot started, you were over in Newark.
Yeah, what happened at that time, there was a series of Black Power conferences around the country. The, the Black Power conference for that year was in Newark, New Jersey.
Now, was that the Black Power conference that dealt with the Black Panthers?
Well, no, everybody. The
Everyone?
Black Panthers were there. Uh, we had tension because the group called Us, led by Ron Karenga, was there.
Ron Karenga. Gosh, I hadn't heard that
Yeah,
name in
yeah,
a long
yeah.
time.
That the meeting was called by I remember Barack Leroy
They
Jones.
were, yeah.
So we went to Newark. There were a bunch of us there. At the time, Us, which was Karenga's organization, and the Black Panther Party were not getting along very well. But beyond that, all of the Black Power people around the country would come together and meet at different places. I went to the one in Philadelphia, the Black Power Conference in Philadelphia with Al Dunmore,
Oh, Greg Dunmore's
Greg
son.
Dunmore's father.
Right, right. I saw Greg last night.
Right. So I went there. Dorothy Dewberry, and I went to the Black Power Conference in Philadelphia the previous year with Al Dunmore. Uh, Al Dunmore at the time was the editor of the Michigan Chronicle,
Right,
and so he wanted access to this, and he could only do it by taking us there. So
right.
we went there and we gave him access to everyone. But I consider Al Dunmore like my godfather.
Yes, yes. A very esteemed man. In fact, we kind of talked about him last night. And so you were in Newark. What happened?
I was in Newark enjoying the conference, and we had a series of workshops all day long. And the fellows came to me and said, "Look, you got to get to Detroit." I said, "Why?" Say, "Man, Detroit is burning. Detroit's on fire." I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You don't know anything about what's going on in Detroit?" I said, "No, I was in the meetings." Came out, saw it on television, and immediately I went and made a reservation to come back to Detroit. I came into Detroit that night, that Sunday night. Dorothy and I were traveling on I-94. And what people don't talk about, that young white men had taken over I-94. They were brandishing guns, uh, rifles, machetes, were yelling out who they, kill the ends, kill the ends. Some of them were outside their cars walking up and down I-94 with weapons.
I-94 near what?
Well, I-94, when you get on the expressway to get to Detroit. See, I just
Yes.
caught the plane into,
Oh, okay. I see. The reason why I asked is because I was going back to school. I had already been on 12 for hours. And the man who was supposed to take me back to school, he lived on 12th and he couldn't get out his
right,
driveway. He lived above Dr. Perkins. No, was Dr. Perkins over there? Yeah, Dr. Perkins
Dr. Perkins.
was over there. And he couldn't get out the driveway. And so it ended up my boyfriend, Alex,
Alex.
took me back to school. And when we were going up 94 towards Eastern, there were people coming to Detroit. They had trailers on the back of their car. You know, the kind of trailers you hook on.
Yes.
People used to move with those trailers and everything. We saw so many of those coming towards Detroit from somewhere.
Well, we couldn't get to Detroit because at one point they shut down the expressway. So
Okay.
we got off of I-94 and went and stayed the night in either Inkster, River Rouge, or Ecorse. Now, Dorothy was raised in Southwest Detroit. I'm from New York. I've only been here a year. I don't know anything about any of this. So the only thing I know is they said we have to stay here tonight, and what we can do in the morning, we'll take West Jefferson in. All that was totally new to me, and so we took West Jefferson, and we had to creep along the street because once again, in that part of the city or the town, young white fellows were out roaming the streets, and you had to be very careful. You had to be careful of the police, and so we sneaked into Detroit through what I'm going to call the back way. So that's how I arrived in. So actually got into Detroit the next morning of the 24th.
Okay. All right. That Monday
That
morning.
Monday morning.
Isn't it ironic how the 50th anniversary happened on a Sunday again?
Yes.
I that was interesting. Anyway, so when you got here, what did you do?
The first thing I did when I got here was to try to contact, what I'm going to call my people. I called Lonnie Peake. I called the other fellows I knew, Kenny Cockrell, um, Kurt Slaughter, the fellas I hung out with, and said, hey man, where are we? What are we doing? Uh, they said, man, it's dangerous out here. They're shooting people. You got to be very careful. Uh, so I sneaked over to where I was staying then, which was on Fullerton between Linwood and Lawton. Lonnie Peake lived around the corner. He lived on Cortland. He said, when you get to the place, and then we'll talk. And so normally we met at Lonnie's house. And so I went around to Lonnie Peake's house, and we said, well, let's go hit the street and see what's in. There's a lot of looting. I was with Lonnie Peake, his brother-in-law at the time, Chuck Russell, and Ron Pugh, who was the nephew of Charles Pugh. And we went up on Dexter Avenue, and
He was the nephew of Charles
yeah.
Pugh.
Ron Pugh, he's an artist, very fine artist. Worked at the Election Commission for some years. So we went to um, Dexter, and basically was working trying to stop young men from looting. Mostly young men. I didn't see many women out there on that day. Mostly young men from looting.
So on Monday they were still looting,
Yeah,
right?
still looting on Monday. But they're mostly young, I'm going to say young, quick guys. Because what happened, we would see them looting. We would go into the store to try to stop them. And these rats would jump out the back window, jump through the window. By that time, we were 25 years old. We were in good shape. We weren't jumping in and out of any windows. Um, and that's where we got in trouble. Lonnie and I went into the store, and we went in to stop these guys from looting. The National Guard came. The National Guard came into the store with the rifles drawn and said, what are you niggas doing? We said, well, we trying to stop some looting. They said, what fellas? Because they were all gone. And Lonnie's brother-in-law, Chuck Russell, says, look, man, don't nobody call me nigga. I'd rather die. So I said, pardon me. I said, are you from New York? It so stunned the National Guard. He said, what do you mean am I from New York? I said, well, I'm from New York. I said, in New York, my nickname is nigga. That's what everybody calls me. He knew. So since you called me that, I thought you must be from New York too. So he said, you get out of here with that foolishness. And it so took him off guard and so stunned him, he told us to get out. And the four of us ran down Dexter and got out of there as quickly as we could. But it was clear they had weapons drawn and they were prepared to shoot us in the store.
Right, right. I mean, just for taking something. And to me, there was some cruelty, so much cruelty going on too. I mean, shooting people in the back, shooting a little girl. I mean, so much is happening. So after that, what did you try to do? Did you think it was futile trying to stop them from looting, or
No, we thought that was our responsibility. I mean,
right
we really saw ourselves as
leaders?
leaders of the community,
Right.
and we wanted to protect the young men from hurting themselves. The other thing that happened, we received a call from John Conyers.
Right.
John Conyers somehow thought that I was the leader of the Black Power guys. I told him, no, that's not true at all. He said, well, I need you to do me a favor. I said, what is that? He said, I want you to get in a flatbed truck with a bullhorn and roll down Dexter and tell the guys to stop. I said, John, we'd have better luck if we put a bullseye in my back. I'm not doing that, John. I said, those guys don't know me. I try to tell you that none of us are connected with any of this kind of stuff. We don't believe in any looting. I said, we are for radical reform. We're not for tearing up our city. Are you crazy? So he says, man, if you won't do it, I'll do it. I said, I'm going to advise you not to do it. And he and Arthur Johnson did it, and they got on that truck, and they got bricked. And the next time I saw John, I told him, I said, you got exactly what I told you were going to
You
get.
know, they did depict that part almost in the beginning of the movie Detroit.
Yes.
He's up there trying to talk to the crowd and they're not listening.
I told him that from the very beginning. I begged John, do not get on that truck and ride down Grand River thinking you're going to have any impact on those people. Those people do not know you. They're not connected to you.
Well, what was he at that time?
He'd recently was a congressman, but he'd only been elected for I think he was running this is his second term.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Didn't realize that. So, yeah, they depicted that, and it's so funny how they made the actor look just like John Conyers did. and John Conyers had on a red like band line shirt, and in the movie he had on a red shirt, I believe. But anyway, so he got. So what happened then? How did things start quieting down? Was it because people were starting to get killed, or what?
Well, I think because people started to get killed, get shot. Everybody knew it was dangerous. There was also a curfew at the time, and
Oh,
and and they were shooting people who were black. You know, it didn't matter who you were, what you were doing. If you were caught in the wrong place at the wrong time, plus you had these group of young men who in the Air National Guard with the police. Um, they're here for the first time. You can see they were nervous because the fellow pulled the M16 on me. Uh, One of the reasons I could have so much humor and try to talk about what my nickname was is because I looked in his eyes and I saw that he was scared and there was nothing in his hand but pure death. So we had to disarm him verbally and get out of there. Otherwise, his own personal fear of us would have caused us to have been shot.
well, the Algiers Motel incident, which was horrible. We all heard about it. And I'm going to tell you something really weird. You're going to think this is crazy because I lived in Detroit all my life. The interactions that we had with the police, mainly my father used to drink. So I used to call the police when he started upsetting the house. And they were always they sent I never got a white policeman coming to the house, but they were always very nice to my father. I mean, to the family and stuff like that. That's when they used to make house calls for that kind of stuff. They stopped making house calls for that. But my father never knew I was the one calling the police. You know, he one day he went up and down the street. Who's calling the police on me? Well, never know. But what I'm saying is, I did not realize, or maybe I was sheltered. I didn't realize it was that bad.
Well, I think in Detroit, first of all, I came back to Detroit on purpose. When I graduated from Tennessee State, I was really an outstanding student, and I had job opportunities all kinds of places. New York, Chicago, L.A. I could have worked anywhere, but I had worked in Detroit the previous year in the factory, and I loved Detroit. I enjoyed Detroit very much. I had very little contact with white people unless they were at work, but I always lived for the most part around Dexter, Dexter in Glendale, Dexter in Fullerton, and a predominantly black community.
I lived near on
You know,
Clements.
yeah. And
Uh,
Detroit was a great place to
I
work.
I liked it. We have a call. Good morning.
What
Hello.
did you like about it?
What what did he said? What did you like about it?
First of all, I
Now
like.
I asked you.
Oh,
You said you liked it. I asked you what do you
well,
like about it. But if he
I was
liked it, then I'm gonna ask both of y'all what did you
okay.
like about it.
All right. Who am I speaking with?
This is Mr. Protest Riot.
Hi. I liked it because I liked I liked my street. I liked my friends. I was a teenager. I was a kid. So I saw what I saw, and I did not at that time have interactions with the police. I didn't, and my friends didn't. We lived right on Clements, right near Livernois and Davison, and then I lived over near Grand River. I mean, what can
I
I
like
say?
Detroit very much. I enjoyed Detroit. So I lived around Dexter. I enjoyed going to the Drome Lounge. I enjoyed eating out at Esquire or going
Esquire.
down Linwood to Greenleaf because I lived on Pingree for a minute. I had friends whose fathers worked in the factory. One of those, Reginald Dunn, his father worked at Chrysler, and they lived out on Princeton, and they would go out for his house, and his father would give parties for all of his son's young friends. So I had lots of classmates. Henry Haygood, who's now his brother Emmett Haygood, architect Reverend Jim Holly, who was who was not in the ministry at that time. So these were all my friends, the guys I grew up with, hung with Kenny Cockrell, Herb Boyd, I enjoyed Tom Binion. I had lots and lots of very good friends in Detroit, so I enjoyed Detroit a lot.
Did you get your answer?
His name, especially Holly, are the ones that sold us out today as you speak. As you be so fond of them.
Well,
But
no, no,
that
no, no,
movie
no, no,
was a
no.
lie. That
No.
movie was
Well,
not the truth.
everybody has a story. Everybody has a story.
And
So don't,
but
I'm
if
not
they're
going to
gonna tell a
discount
story, it should be
anybody's
true.
story. Well, we tell the truth as we saw it. And as far as I was concerned, I grew up here. But then, I saw, and then I started protesting and all of this. When I started seeing, your world gets bigger the older you get. And that's what happens. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Protest Riot. Thank you. Another call. Good morning. Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot about that, and I don't know what the business people are. What is their point of this celebration? But I would say this: I was 27 at the time, and I was working at the factories, and all of a sudden, what you're seeing in the rise, I don't hear. It was the thing was boiling in Detroit and all the major cities is because there's a policy of suburbanization all over the country. They moved out all the businesses to the suburb and was creating suburbs all over in Louisville, Kentucky, where I came from, all over. And that's what you're seeing. You were seeing a reaction to being shut out of the job market. And at that time, you had over in Detroit 14,000 retail businesses in Detroit. And that was in 1962. 1972, you had 6,000 retail businesses in Detroit. Also, in manufacturing, you had 3,000. I'm just rounding off, in Detroit, manufacturing. Then in 72, you had 2,000. And wholesale, you had 3,000, and again 2,000 in wholesale, and that happened all over the country. That's why Detroit wasn't just unique. It's just a lot of people got killed, but that was the real cause. And I don't hear no one talking about that policy created. And in Detroit, let me tell you the reaction we had. I left Dodge, Maine. I got fired because I had a problem with the general foreman. I was at Ford, and I wanted to get back to Dodge, Maine because we was organizing in Dodge, Maine, which called DRUM. And when they had a program called How to Win, and the one who engineered the policy was the federal government. They knew what to do in Detroit to keep the people out of the street. They paid half of our wages. And I was working at Ford at the time. Got the job at Ford. Half of our wages, and Ford paid the other half, and that lasted to '69. Then you had a recession, and they put us out in the street again. So I don't hear no one talking about who engineered it. The power structure making like people just out there and tore up the city. And they'll talk about the other cities at the same time was having the same problem. And what was the thread all between all of them? They moved all the jobs out. And didn't have no jobs. And the police just fanned that spark and caused that prairie fire.
Okay, don't filibuster, Tyrone. Tyrone, please don't filibuster. He wants to answer you. You can't. This is not a one-sided thing. Go on, Dan.
Okay, I can't hear you. The engineer got it so low if they would turn it up.
Well, I'm talking.
Is this Tyrone?
Yeah.
Yes, I hired you at Huber Avenue Foundry. I worked in as a personnel management trainee. Now, the question I was asked was, what was my experience? The kinds of phenomenon that you're talking about as a person fairly new to the city, those were not phenomenon that I would have been familiar with at that time. Now, as I stayed here and learned more about the city, studied more about the city, of course, my understanding of the events in Detroit and across the country changed. But if you're asking an individual person what was the experience, I like Detroit. I met many wonderful and good people in Detroit. Some who part of the bourgeoisie, some who went on to work with Drum, L. Rum, the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, the Black Panther Party, Republic of New Africa, the Nation of Islam, all kinds of groups, basic working people. So I enjoyed the people of this community. I was raised, I say, in Harlem, and my life in Detroit was primarily in the black community. And I enjoyed the people that I met there. Some of these other things you're talking about, these are phenomenon that I became aware of much later, but they were not things that I was aware of when I was 25 years old.
But you know, like when I was in the plant, Dodge, Maine, I was a material handler. I seen jobs leaving, and I would get the jobs and stack the line up, and I seen them leaving. And when I was at Ford, I seen the crank and the Dearborn leaving. So I understood simply what was going on. But later, I did my study, and that's what I found out. That was the real cause. And the personal experiences, if we just talk about them and not the real cause, then they put the cause on the black community, and they devastate the black community in Detroit, around the country, and they tell the world that we were just out there and people wouldn't take advantage of opportunity and die. But they caused those conditions, as Dr. King said. They create that darkness, and we reacted to it. That's a wrong way to react. We should have organized and did a civil rights shut down the cities and stuff like that, but we didn't. Look at Dr. King. We was those people were just tired of conditions.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna hang up because I can't hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Well, let me say this. When you have something, a big conflagration like that, people have a variety of experiences. There are people whose experience in Detroit was different than mine. Later on, I began to meet other guys who were born and raised in Detroit who had experiences with the police that I didn't have, having recently moved here. I'd only been here about a year when the conflagration took place. So I never had negative contact with the police at that time. Most of my life was spent going to work and working and living in the black community, going down to the 20 Grand. At that time, the whole Motown scene was just breaking off and it was hot. Jazz was hot. I was a big jazz lover. So guys like Herb Boyd, Kenny Cockrell, the piano player Ken Cox, John Sinclair, these were all guys who were introducing me to the music scene in Detroit, the jazz scene. And so
John Sinclair, the poet.
Yeah, John Sinclair, the poet. That's what my life was for the most part. Was about. I wasn't connected while I was in the movement. I had been in SNCC in the South. I also worked in SNCC here in Detroit through Dorothy Dewberry, who I later married, but who at that time was the head of SNCC here in Detroit. And so she introduced me to to General Baker, to Glenn Dardell, to all of the fellows who were active, to the Henry brothers, to Milton Henry, to Richard Henry, to Reverend Clegg. Reverend Clegg was so central to Detroit. To Reverend Clegg or Jeramogi Agimana Bibi, who was really an extraordinary person. So all of this, I found Detroit exciting. Detroit was lively. There were many militant and progressive people here. So it was a city that I loved. I came back to Detroit on purpose. I could have easily gone to New York. I had family in New York. I'm Dorothy Heights' nephew. I was connected in New York. I came to Detroit because of my love for the people and for the commitment here to music. So that's how I felt about Detroit. Some of the other things that happened, these things happen later as you stay in a place longer and you begin to learn the dynamics of the place. Right. But initially, after being here on the year, this is not information that I had at the time.
Right, absolutely. Now, the Algiers Motel incident. What did you first hear? When did you hear it? What?
Well, the young men were shot on I think the 26th. After they were shot, my understanding is they had been beaten. So two of the boys, Lee I call them boys because they, 17, 18, 19. They were really young men. Uh, James Sorter and Lee Forsythe, after they were beaten, went to Carl Cooper's home and told Carl Cooper's stepfather, his name is Omar Gill, and Carl Cooper's mother, Margaret Gill, that Carl was dead. They were covered with blood from head to toe. Carl's dead. Omar, Carl's father or stepfather, called the Algiers, trying to find out what happened to his son. And according to him, he was told, if you don't want to get off the phone, and if you don't want to have the same thing happen to you, you better not come down here. So after that, Omar called Dorothy Dewberry. Now, Dorothy Dewberry's mother, my later mother-in-law, Mary Dewberry, and Carl Cooper's grandmother went to Garfield Elementary School together and had known each other all their lives. So they were friends. Dorothy was known as someone who was in the movement because she had worked with the NAACP since the late 1950s. And she also worked with McHurd over at 903 West Grand Boulevard. So they knew she was a movement person, and they said, we need some help. My son has been killed. So Dorothy told me about it, and then I called Lonnie Peake, Kurt Slaughter, and Kenny Cockrell. And I said, look, let's go over and meet with the families. And Kenny had just finished law school, and Kenny could take down the notes. And that's how I got involved. So Carl Cooper's stepfather called Dorothy, and he talked to me, and that's how we got involved in the whole Algiers motel incident.
Okay, we have a call. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. What happened at Algiers Hotel? I will hang up and listen.
Okay, thank you.
Well, Algiers Motel at that time was what people would call a transient motel. People came there for short stays. Persons came there for short-term sexual activity. There was a lot of at that time. There was a lot of hustling going on in Detroit. Detroit was a hustling town because there were lots of men making a lot of money in Detroit. Detroit at that time was the highest income and the largest percentage of home ownership of any black community in the United States. So a lot of activity around trying to get the money from these men who were working in factories. There was prostitution on 12th Street. There was prostitution on Woodward Avenue, and all around. Algiers Motel, so it was a transient motel. But that's not all it was. It was a short stay. If you want to go to a motel and you want to just stay, for a week, the Dramatics stayed there. They were there, by the way, at the time of the incident. So Carl Cooper, Aubrey Pollard, and Fred Temple.
They were there, but not all were there. Ron Banks was not there.
But some of them others were there.
Yeah.
So, and then the group was changed. Squirrel may have been. The different guys were there, but they weren't necessarily there participating in activity. They were there because, once again, the rebellion was going on. They were shooting in the street, so you couldn't travel in the street. You had to get somewhere. If you were black and male, you had to get somewhere and stay. Carl, the young men I'm talking about, they couldn't move because, you'd be a victim if you traveled. So you had to find you somewhere to stay and just stay there until the scene changed. The other thing, in some of the movies, they talk about the fact that these young men were dealing in drugs. There was an autopsy taken. The autopsy was paid for by the Detroit Free Press. The autopsy showed that none of these young men had used drugs. Neither of the fellows who were killed.
Nor Fred Temple, I think it was Fred.
Yeah, Fred Temple, Aubrey Pollard, and Carl Cooper,
right,
nor James Sorter, nor Lee Forsythe. There's no evidence they were using drugs. Yes, they were in the hotel, but look, if you were black and they were street guys, they were hustling guys, but there's no clear evidence of what specifically they were doing. People can guess what they were doing, but there's no actual knowledge that's what they were doing. In large part, what they were doing was trying to find some cover to try to be off the street, because if you were black and male walking up and down Woodward and Euclid, you were going to get shot.
So what was said about the police who shot them? Why were they shot? What?
Well, a couple of things happened. One thing that has not come out, as I said, I have my notes from 50 years ago. I took notes. Let me show you this. I took notes from 50 years ago. Excuse me. One of the things that happened is that the day before, let's go back to the 22nd. I'm sorry, the 25th. They got shot on the 26th. One of the officers apparently had been there, had met with them, had shaken them down, had taken them all their money from them and their jewelry. So he knew exactly who they were. Uh, and later on, it was discovered that he had taken Carl Cooper's ring. He sold the ring to the security guard, and later Lee Forsythe bought that ring back from the security guard at the White Tower. He recognized that he had Lee Carl Cooper's ring.
Was that the same security guard that was
The same security guard,
dismute?
Dismute, who the movie used as a consultant. So the police knew what was going on with them. They talk about sniping. There was no sniping. There was some evidence that Carl may have had a started a pistol. Lots of this is real conjecture. But even if someone fired a starter pistol, they came in with double shotguns. There was evidence that at least one of the boys, his arm was shot off, and he was standing up against the wall, spread eagle. The other boy was shot in the groin, in the penis and testicles with a shotgun. And the officers wanted to know from the girls, the two white ladies who had come in from Ohio, what are you doing here with these niggas? So there's real clear evidence that there were racial issues, and they just assassinated these boys. This was just cold-blooded assassination. They were not armed. They were not attacking the police. They were totally under control.
That was a horrible situation. And it was that situation like that was kind of depicted in the film, but the dismute character, I don't, it's like he initially tried to be kind of friendly with the police in order to maybe keep them calm, or that's the way he told it. But you told me that he had hit the boys too.
That's what they said. Once again, I was not there. I recorded what James Sorter and Lee Forsythe told me at the time. These are my notes from 50 years ago.
Right. I see it. Right here. I couldn't. It was such a horrid thing that happened, and it set off. I never read the book. Did you?
I read the book. In fact, I wrote the chapter in the book called Fuel for the Fire Next Time. Somehow, John Hershey, who I never met, got a hold of my notes, and he wrote that chapter as if he were I. I never met John Hershey. In fact, I went to New York and met with the publishing company about the fact that my material was stolen and included in the book as if it were mine. And there's all kind of communication going back between the publishing company and John Hershey. And what's interesting, one of the fellows who's doing the story now is John Hershey's grandson.
No stuff.
Yes, and he and I have had a chance to talk about this and develop a relationship. In fact, we're going to be together tomorrow. And this is the first time that we've come face to face with this matter. And he's gone, at least Danielle McGuire has gone into the archives at Yale University, and everybody thought that I was, making up a story that I wrote that chapter, and it was taken and published under his name, and they found the evidence in the Yale archives of conversation from the publishing company questioning John Hershey. What is this? This Dan Aldridge has come here, and it seems like he knows what he's talking about, and we don't have recorded evidence back from John Hershey, But the publishing company was very disturbed about it. They offered, in fact, they offered me if I would be quiet. They offered me 3 books, if you can imagine that. So, but so that the other thing is, let me just mention the cover up by the Detroit News and Free Press at the Algiers Tribunal. I was primarily. This is the picture.
Tell the audience what the Algiers Tribunal was.
Well, I went to the Lonnie Peake and I went to and Kurt Slaughter went to the preliminary examination. We saw that the entire thing was really fake. First of all, the prosecuting attorney never presented the evidence. He never called the witnesses. Carl Cooper and Lee Forsythe were there to give testimony. Not Carl Cooper, I'm sorry, James Sorter. He never called them. So once we saw there was no fair trial, we decided what we would do, that we would hold our own public trial of the police. And we set up a tribunal. And what you see here is a picture of the tribunal. The far left here, that's Carl Cooper's mother. That's his Aunt Betty. That's his sister Tammy. There's Dorothy's sister Carolyn Dewberry. On the other side of her, that's State Representative Daisy Elliott. In the back there, you see pictures of Reverend Clegg's 2 daughters, Pearl Clegg and Kristen Clegg, because the tribunal was held at the shrine of the Black Madonna. Earlier that summer, we had participated. I'm saying SNCC. I was a member of SNCC at the time, and our leader at the time was Rap Brown. We brought Rap Brown here to speak at the
Dexter Theater. I remember that
right,
day.
At the Dexter Theater. And what
wasn't he on top of the roof?
I was standing right next to him on top of the roof. I should have brought those pictures.
Oh yeah.
I was standing next to him on top of the roof because the crowd was so huge, just thousands upon thousands of people. As far as you could see, there were people. So John Ashby and Dorothy Ashby owned the Dexter Theater. Dorothy was a renowned jazz harpist, and John was a playwright. We decided not to go back to them again because they were receiving tremendous pressure, death threats, threats from the police. So we then went and asked Reverend Clegg if we could hold the Algiers Tribunal at the Shrine of the Black Madonna, and Reverend Clegg said definitely. People told him that the church would be in danger, and Reverend Clegg said that's what they were in the business for. And also, by the way, interesting footnote, the stenographer for this who took notes, the stenographer was Carolyn Cheese Kilpatrick, who later became Congresswoman. She's not there, but she was our stenographer. We put together a jury. Let me tell you who was on the jury. Rosa Parks was on the jury. Wow. Ed Vaughn's bookstore was on the jury. Jackie Vaughn, who was state senator at the time, he was on the jury. John O. Killens, the novelist, he was on the jury. Frank Joyce, People Against Racism, later the UAW, he was on the jury. Valerie Shook was on the jury, and a member of the church, Russell Brown was on the jury.
Well, we only have a few more minutes. We have a quick call, and I want to bring this to, because aren't you doing some more talks this week?
I'm speaking tomorrow night at the Museum of African American History, the Wright Museum, at 6 o'clock.
Okay, hold on. Good morning. Hello? Hello?
Good morning, Brenda.
Yes?
Good morning. Good morning, Brenda.
Yes, can you hear me?
Oh, look, I just wanted to call in and I want to make a comment. This is Ann. You know, we lived on Selden, right across from the Cheney School.
Uh-huh.
And I just want to say that, you know, they had soldiers on the corner of Humboldt, you know. Okay, Humboldt, you know, was right down the street from us. And they were parked in Jeeps. And the soldiers were, you know, they had guns on, you know, machine guns. And they were standing around with their guns, you know, and they had on green uniforms. I remember that. I was young, but I recall that. And then, you know, they was walking around, and our father and people were telling us to stay off the streets, stay in the house, to stay off the streets. And, you know, it was just something to see. and
Yes.
I'll never forget that though, but I didn't see anybody get shot. They just told us to stay in the house and, stay off the streets. But something like that you don't forget.
Right, you
And I
don't.
just want to call and say that, I did see that happen.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank you.
Bye
You have a
bye.
good day.
Bye bye. You too. Good morning. Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, speak a little louder, please.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I want to ask your host there, the brilliant historian, was Nevers in on that Algiers shooting?
No, not to my knowledge. No, their case, that case was much later. Much later.
Well, you mean the 67 where they killed Mr. Temple?
Yes. I the only
I
police
can't hear you now.
the only policeman's name that I have are the ones who were charged with the murder. I don't know of any other the names of any other police. So I can't
Yeah,
say where they
if
were
I
or whether or not.
remember,
I don't
if
have
I
their names.
if I remember correctly, well, Temple married into my family. We came from my family's and ancestors came from Millersville, Georgia, and the Temples married into my family. That was the young man that one of the young men that the cops killed. And from what I understand, Nevers was in on that. And at the court, he came into the women's bathroom and intimidated and threatened Temple's mother. He came into the ladies' bathroom to like the pigs always do. They like to intimidate. They lie and cover up and kill on the Marie to verify the reports that they make, the lies that they tell. They cut to cover up. They'll lie and kill.
Well, I have no
I'm
evidence of
pretty
that.
sure she's dead now.
Well, thank you
I'm
so
pretty sure it was never that
thank thank you
came
so
into
much for the
the
call.
ladies' restroom.
I have to wrap up now, but thank you so much for the call. Bye.
All right.
Bye. So tomorrow you will be at the African American Museum tomorrow Tuesday, the 25th
5th at 6 o'clock.
at 6 p.m. And what is this about?
This is about the Algiers Tribunal. Uh, the historian Danielle McGuire, who wrote the book on Rosa Parks, she'll be there presenting because she's writing another book on the Algiers Tribunal and the Algiers incident, and also Reverend Lonnie Peake will be there because he and I and Dorothy Dewberry are the three people who organized what became known as the Algiers Tribunal. I will also, by the way, bring a picture of Dorothy and I probably on top of the Dexter Theater with Rat Brown because these incidents were fairly close together.
Right.
And to try to give people some idea, what's interesting about this, and the thing I want to really rest with,
Oh,
oh, is that
yeah, the bewitching hour is here, everybody. Be sure to join me this Friday at 9 and 10 o'clock. I'd like to thank Reverend Daniel Aldrich. He is a wealth of information and history. And this is so interesting. His notes from that time are so detailed. Really, really good. So thank you so much, Reverend Dan Aldrich. Thanks to all of you for joining us. And the saga continues. Have a good day.